If you own Nvidia, Micron, AMD, Sofi, and even Palantir, you need to know that Monday is going to be huge. We're going to talk about what's going to happen this week in the stock market, what could potentially happen with President Trump and the 10-year note. All I ask from you is that you give me a beautiful smile to send out those good vibes, smash that like button, and let's get into it. Please read the disclaimer. So right now, the S&P 500 closed the weekend on a pullback, right? The S&P 500 closed at 7,400, down minus 1.34%. The NASDAQ 100 closed also down 1.5% after a just amazing run from the bottom of the conflict fear, right? In April, beginning of April, the NASDAQ is up 27.5%. We have, of course, Nvidia that has gone up on an amazing run here, up almost 37% in 48 days. And of course, the shining light of this whole big run, Micron, that's also up significantly, but did pull back over the past few days, 125% of the last 44 days, but did have a pullback here of about 11%. Of course, we have Sofi that hasn't been doing great lately, almost had a crossover here for Sofi, but then pulled back. Of course, the situation around crypto has been affecting it, but right now we'll see what happens. Intel, of course, it had also an amazing run, coming out with their earnings just a few weeks ago, and the partnership with Apple pulled back also over the last 4 or 5 days. So the end of the week didn't end that great. We'll talk about 18% there down for Intel. There's a few reasons why, which we'll get to in just a second. Of course, we have SanDisk that has been on an amazing run, Applied Optoelectrics, but all of them, BE, right, Bloom Energy, Quarent, that has been on an amazing run. So we have all these stocks that have been pulling up. But there are a few things that are affecting the market. Of course, whenever you have a situation where the markets have been on massive rallies, there's always the probability that the markets will pull back just a smidge, maybe more. That's how markets work. There's FOMO, people and money continue to flow into the markets until there's a catalyst that sends the markets back. Sometimes it's something financial. Sometimes it's something that happens between countries. Sometimes it's the 10-year note, which we'll get to in just a second. Right now, we have some big events coming up this week. But before that, I just want to remind you that, again, this video is for educational purposes, for entertainment purposes only. I don't know what the stock market, I don't know what every single individual stock is going to do every single day. So just remember that. Also remember, I will never contact you on social media asking to sign up to anything or to send me anything. Those are scammers, those are imposters. Please be very careful out there. So what do we got this week? We got Monday. The only thing that could potentially happen on Monday, and this is what we have to look at, is the fact that Trump has come back from China, and now he's going to be focused again on the conflict in Iran. And he just said, Iran better get moving or they won't be any of, this is what he said, right? Time is the essence. He has to make a decision. Is he going to, the ceasefire and the agreement has never come to fruition for a peace agreement. So now what, right? But we know that the yields have gone up significantly, not just in the US, but the 30-year is over 5%, the 20-year bond is over 5%, and the 10-year is over 4.5%. We've noted on this channel that every single time the 10-year has gone over 4.5% or got very close, Trump has a tendency to change what he's doing. So it happened back last year in the height of the tariff fears, when the market was the lowest. We got to 4.5%, and then Trump did that 90-day postponement. No, he postponed the tariffs. That there were, of course, they were very draconian. He pulled it back a little bit, and then the markets rallied off of that. Similar, a few weeks ago, before the ceasefire agreement was announced, we were also getting very close to that 4.5, and then he announced the ceasefire agreement. So we'll see what is he going to do now, because previous times that we've got to this situation, he has pulled back, he has changed his tactics. So it's going to be very interesting to see what could potentially happen there. Now, for individual stocks, we have, of course, the Fed meeting minutes that happened on Wednesday. This is the last meeting with Federal Chairman Powell that was in charge. On Wednesday, of course, Nvidia has their earnings. So Nvidia, the biggest company in the world, earnings, whatever the CEO says could affect the stocks like AMD, like Nvidia, of course, right? But of course, also the chip companies like Intel and SanDisk and Micron. If the quote unquote AI bubble is popped a little bit and Nvidia says that their outlook for the next 6 months is lower than expected, then we could have a situation where all these stocks start pulling back because of the fear, right? But if Jensen says that, they have so much earnings, right? They have so many what's the word I'm looking for? Orders, right? They have lots of orders. They have big partnerships. They have, a lot of things in the funnel. Then other companies that are maybe parallel or similar, or potentially that could be using NVIDIA services. Because remember, a lot of these companies, people are looking at them as infrastructure. So the ones that we mentioned there, AAOI, for example, optic cables, right? So if you need to transfer the information inside the data centers, you need fiber cables and transmitters that are capable of transmitting a large amount of data very, very fast. So I don't know if you guys know this, but I used to be a communication systems engineer, and we would work then back in the day when we got 1 terabyte, back in the day, 5, 6 years ago, right? We got 1 terabyte transmitters. It was a big deal because we were able to transmit 1 terabyte of data every single second. Well, now it's a lot larger than that. And of course, you need the infrastructure in order to transmit the data. Think about all the data that is being transmitted through all the AI processing that is going on right now, not just ChatGPT and Claude, but all of the video and pictures and images that are being created. It's heavy, right? So this is going to be very, very important. Of course, then you have the data centers and cooling and all the things around that. So this could affect everything that's going on. And that is going to be a big thing for what's going on this week in the stock market. Again, we ended the week on a low. What was interesting, if you've been watching the channel for a while, we noticed that Thursday was a green day, right? This is when we had the latest high, but I noticed that the VIX, right, the fear and greed index, or you could call it that if you wanted, the fear factor, was red. Okay, so that was interesting, and we were looking at the 2 days before, right? It was kind of flat, right? There was a big day, and the VIX wasn't telling us that there was a lot of confidence in the market. It took another day. Then on Friday, we saw that big pullback. Of course, the pullback came with not a big announcement coming out of China. There was no tariff deal. So that also put a little bit of fear in the markets. And of course, the yields that continue to rise. What was happening in Japan has also put a lot of fear in the markets. The Japanese yield continues to rise. The UK yield continues to rise. And Japanese investors hold a significant amount of these US treasuries. They sold 29.6 billion in the last quarter, right? So this could, again, potentially put pressure. If you remember the Japan carry trade about a year and a half ago, there was a situation where the money in Japan was very, very cheap. The central bank there had interest rates basically in zero. So people were borrowing money, yen, and they were going and investing around the world in the stock markets around the world because it was basically, quote unquote, no interest rate. So that's amazing for an investor. And so when the Bank of Japan started raising interest rates, this created a snowball where the Japanese investors started pulling out their investments, and this kind of created a snowball. It got stopped, right? We didn't have what people were thinking that might happen. Look how high the VIX got right there. It went all the way up to 65 when the Japan carry trade sell-off was happening. And could we have a situation right now that could give us indication that we're seeing something similar? Right now, the VIX is still under 20. So anything under 20 in my book is considered pretty bullish, but I'm not flipping bearish yet. When we get over 20, that is a signal that there could be a rise here. So, even here we had above 20, but then it pulled back. But it was in the movement to the upside here on the VIX. And eventually, towards the end of March, we did get that ceasefire, and then the market started coming up and the VIX started pulling back a little bit. So it will be very interesting to see what happens. And another thing, of course, the Russell 2000 has been doing amazing and small cap stocks have been doing amazing. But if you look at the S&P 500, basically only 10 stocks are keeping the entire stock market from collapsing. The S&P 500 has rallied nearly 16% since March 30th, making it look like the entire market is booming. But under the surface, this has become one of the narrowest and most concentrated rallies in decades. Just 10 stocks drove 69% of the entire move higher. Alphabet alone contributed 15% of the rally. Nvidia added another 10%. Amazon, Broadcom, Intel, Micron, Apple, AMD, and Microsoft carried most of the rest. The other 490 companies in the S&P 500 contributed just 31%. This means that the market is not actually moving higher together. A very small group of AI and semiconductor stocks is pushing the entire index upward while most of the stocks are barely participating. The global financial system isn't in a great place, but there's a lot of money that is going to potentially come into AI and semiconductors, and that's why the markets continue to rally. So we need to be careful here. I mean, there could be a pullback, especially if your portfolio has been very heavy towards AI and semiconductors and everything around it, then you've been doing amazing. But if you own stocks that are industry or food and beverage or retail and things like that, so it hasn't been that great. Okay. And so it will be very interesting to see what will potentially happen. Of course, oil prices continue to be high, and gold and silver pulled back towards the end of the week. Silver pulled back almost 10%, 9% there on Friday. Gold also 2.37%. So what is that telling us? Usually gold, silver go up when there's uncertainty, right? But the yields are high and yet gold and silver are selling off. So it's confusing. Oil is at 100. It seems to be locked into that kind of range over the past few weeks. Again, we'll see what happens tomorrow when we get more information from the President Trump. And listen, inflation is continuing to go up. Central banks are absolutely losing control over global inflation. Inflation is now rising 27 out of 29 major countries at the same time. This is one of the broadest inflation surges the world has seen since the pandemic. Oil above 100 because of the Iran war is making it even worse. Every country that imports oil is now importing inflation through the Strait of Hormuz. Central banks that already hiked are hiking again. The ones that pause are reversing course. The Fed still has not moved, while U.S. inflation is now at 3.8 and climbing again. The last time central banks called inflation temporary, U.S. inflation eventually surged to 9%. And so, again, all of these factors could, on the one hand, pull the market back. But if we do get a solution here, oil drops, then how much money could potentially come into the stock market? And where does it go? Does it continue to go to the AI stocks and to the semiconductor stocks and to the memory stocks, right? Or does it go to the quote unquote undervalued stocks that have the potential to benefit from lower inflation? So this is going to be very interesting to see how this week plays out. Let me know in the comment section, what do you think? Now, of course, Nvidia is in a very interesting situation with, it's the creme de la creme of the stock market, the largest market cap in the world. It hit a new all-time high on Thursday, going into earnings. And when you have a situation where it's run up basically since 31st of March, this is the largest stock in the world, right? Remember, it's up 37.38 going into earnings. What can potentially happen here, and it's something that we need to take into consideration, is that even if Nvidia has amazing earnings and beats all expectations, but the expectations that they beat are not tenfold, right? So let's say they beat a little bit or it's on par. Then because the stock has gone up so much over the past few weeks, it could even pull back. Even if the earnings are good, we could have a situation that Nvidia's price will pull back. But that's a discussion for, let's talk about that again on Tuesday and maybe Wednesday morning. That could potentially happen there. So it will be, and listen, AMD, for example, also similar, right? After earnings popped, didn't, moved up a little bit, but then pulled back. It's almost basically where it was at the day after earnings. We'll see how AMD acts here in the next few days. Sofi, again, price action hasn't been so great. but it does have these pullbacks sometimes. So we'll see what SoFi will do. Micron, amazing run here. Again, is it a bubble? We'll see over the next week or two what happens there. And also, of course, SanDisk is basically in a similar situation. The two, we'll see. And the ones also like IREN and AAOI, BE, Coherence. So we'll see what happens with these going forward. And of course, you have Tesla Maesla, right? And Elon Musk. We'll see what happens with him and his SpaceX. And, we'll talk about that. Palantir has been in an interesting situation after their earnings really hasn't moved over the past few weeks. So we'll see what will happen with Palantir. Very, very interesting times ahead of us in the stock market. And let me know in the comment section, what do you think? Where is the stock market going to go from here? If you want to subscribe to the channel for more stock updates, now's the time to subscribe. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think is going to happen this week. Are we going to see a continuation of the rally, or is the market too high and it needs a little bit of a breather, maybe even 10% pullback potentially here? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time. And like I always say, let's make a lot of money.